And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas, gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's April 27th, day marked by diverse celebrations. It is the 117th day of the year. Just 248 days remain to the year's over with, and we'll start a new one. It's National Tell a Story Day. Babe Ruth Day celebrates the legacy of the legendary baseball player. World Tapir Day. Morse Code Day. It's also the day in 1521 where Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan was killed in the Philippines. In 1868, the steamboat Sultana exploded on the Mississippi River, killed nearly 2,000 people. There's literally something fascinating on almost every day of the year. You just have to know where to look. Well, let's see what stories we have in the news. You know, there was another assassination attempt at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Man with a shotgun got by security outside the hotel and tried to make a run for it to the ballroom where the president was at. According to the manifesto he sent to all his family, he was going to save the country by killing President Trump. He didn't make it. Well, President Trump called 60 Minutes host disgraceful for reading the White House Correspondents' Dinner suspect's alleged manifesto on the air. He's talking about CBS News correspondent Nora O'Donnell, and who was leading the 60 Minutes Sunday night show. He sat down for an interview with authorities after authorities identified the suspect as 31-year-old Cole Allen of Torrance, California, adding he prepared a manifesto outlining his intent and shared his anti-Trump and anti-Christian rhetoric on social media. O'Donnell read alleged portions of the document that alluded to concerns over a rapist and a pedophile and asked for Trump's reaction. He said, I was waiting for you to read that because I knew you would, because you're horrible people. Horrible people. Yeah, he did write that. I'm not a rapist. I didn't rape anybody. Donald said, do you think he's referring to you? And he said, I'm not a pedophile. You read that crap from some sick person. I got associated with all the stuff that has nothing to do with me. I was totally exonerated. Your friends on the other side of the plate are the ones that were involved with, let's say, Epstein or some other things. But I said to myself, I'll do this interview and they'll probably read the manifesto. He's a sick person, but you should be ashamed of yourself reading that because I'm not any of those things. O'Donnell interrupted to allege that she was quoting the alleged gunman's words. Trump continued to call her disgraceful. Well, Obama said motive is unclear despite the manifesto outlining specifically his targets in the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. Former President Obama said the motive behind the shooting outside the White House Correspondents' Dinner remains unclear, even as investigators review writings from the suspect outlining plans to target President Trump and members of his administration. Obama's statement on X focused first on the lack of confirmed details about what drove the attack before condemning the violence more broadly and praising the Secret Service. What's interesting is the alleged assassin, would-be assassin, was a teacher from California, and he'd been Teacher of the Month in December 2024. He said, according to Obama, we don't have the details yet about the motives behind last night's shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And he said it's incumbent upon us to reject the idea that violence isn't in place in our democracy. It's also a sober reminder of the courage and sacrifice the U.S. Secret Service agents show every day. Well, one of them did get shot point blank with a shotgun, but luckily he was wearing a vest. Well, Jimmy Kimmel is at it again. Called Melania Trump an expectant widow before White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. Late night host Jimmy Kimmel mocked President Trump on First Lady Melania Trump in a White House Correspondents' Dinner parody this week, calling her an expectant widow, joking about her marriage this day before the dinner was disrupted by a shooting. Our First Lady Melania, he said. Look at Melania, so beautiful. Miss Trump, you have to glow like an expectant widow. Well, Kimmel has never been known for tasteful performances. MS Now hosts are calling out disturbing left-wing theories that the White House Correspondents' Dinner was a false flag orchestrated by President Trump himself. They're calling it a disturbing conspiracy theory spread by left-wing commentators claiming that the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting was a false flag. One thing I'm disturbed by is we woke up this morning and seeing folks on the internet say that this was a false flag. We basically all in cahoots to do and to say this was staged. MS Now host Eugene Daniels said on the weekend. He went on to say, and I think as somebody who, for all of us who's in the room, who had to jump on the ground, who had to text our family and friends and tell them we were okay, calling our moms like so many people in the country have done for decades, see people say those kinds of things, it's frustrating and it's disturbing, and it shows the issues we have to try and fix in this country. Had it not been for the Secret Service, a whole lot more people would have died. No question about that. Well, President Trump has canceled the peace mission to Islamabad as U.S. Navy begins demining operations in the Strait of Hormuz. They canceled the peace talks Saturday, demanding Iran call them when they're ready to talk. Iran's ceasefire with Lebanon faced tension on Saturday after strikes on Hezbollah targets killed 6 people. U.S. Navy has officially begun operations to clear Iranian sea mines from the Strait of Hormuz to reopen the critical shipping lane for global oil transit. Russia confirmed that Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi will travel to Moscow for discussions on Monday. UAE Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed praised President Trump's peace efforts in a phone call with the Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And Tehran submitted a deal via Pakistan mediators to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and postpone nuclear talks to a later stage. They seem to act like they have the whip hand. Well, Mamdami's racial equity plans hidden moving the goalpost ploy to justify massive government expansion. New York City socialist mayor Zohran Mamdami is moving the goalpost on poverty in the nation's largest city with his newly unveiled racial equity plan to justify a massive expansion of government intervention, top city policy analyst warns. Mamdami released his preliminary citywide racial equity plan earlier this month, which quickly received pushback from President Trump's Justice Department, while from the Manhattan Institute's Santiago Vidal Calvo told Fox News that when the report uses a true cost of living to claim 62% of New Yorkers can't make ends meet in the city, it's implored to declare the crisis needs more government involvement. Well, the fascinating thing is that most of Mamdami's promises that got him elected have gone by the wayside so far. It just allowed him to gain title control, I guess you could say. Well, we spent 3 or 4 years living in New York City. I can't say it was exciting, certainly eye-opening. Well, ACLU and NAACP is accused of trying to sabotage U.S. tourism with a fear-mongering campaign. Progressive fear-mongering campaign ahead of the World Cup is drawing a backlash as one critic accused leftist groups of trying to sabotage the U.S. tourist industry by targeting American business owners over the opposition to President Trump. In an interview with Fox News, Golf Freeman, president of the U.S. Travel Association, called questioning the safety of travelers into the U.S. a step too far. He also called discouraging international visitors from traveling to the U.S. to make a political point about the Trump administration is the height of absurdity. And it is. He was elected by the American people. You may not be happy with it, but so what? Well, Diego Pavia accepted the Ravens' rookie minicamp invite after making an unfortunate NFL draft history. He was the polarizing former Vanderbilt quarterback who was runner-up in Heisman voting last season. Finally found a home in the NFL after going undrafted this weekend. Accepted an invitation to the Baltimore Ravens rookie minicamp on a tryout basis, according to multiple reports. Doesn't have a spot on the roster yet, but it's a start as he looks to crack into the NFL with Baltimore. And if he could, it would certainly be a fine ending to his college days. Well, the work of scientists and suspicious disappearances is a prime target for hostile foes, according to a retired FBI agent. If you've not been following the news, 13 or 14 scientists who've worked in various aspects of aerospace have either gone missing or been found deceased. About a little over a dozen cases have come to light, according to a retired high-level FBI official. He says some of them fit a pattern he considers suspicious. He said the missing and disappearance thing is suspicious inherently, according to Chris Swecker, who served as assistant director of the FBI. And what they were working on would certainly, without a doubt, be a target of a hostile foreign intelligence service like Russia or China. Could be Iran, could be Pakistan. He believes the 6 deaths that have been widely reported don't have much in common and doesn't believe they're connected. While he ain't convinced that there's a conspiracy afoot even among the missing scientists, he agrees that authorities should be looking for links in the disappearances, given the high-value, sensitive technology they all worked with or near. And, of course, the disappearance of retired Air Force Major General William Neil McCaslin earlier this year set off the cascade of theories about the missing and the dead scientist. If you'll remember, he was the former commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory, had connections to the Los Alamos National Laboratory where top-secret nuclear research is conducted. He vanished in New Mexico after leaving his home with only a pair of boots and a handgun. Left his phone, keys, and glasses behind. He said, I'm just saying that the FBI would have an interest in anything that happened to him because of what they were working on. And in fact, when McCaslin, the FBI showed up uninvited that very afternoon. He lived in Albuquerque, which is not but a couple of 100 miles from where I'm sitting. And hadn't even been a peep about where he might be or what might have happened to him. Well, there's been a proposal to change ICE into NICE. He endorsed the idea of renaming the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement as National Immigration and Customs Enforcement and go from ICE to NICE. In a True Social post, he shared a screenshot of a post on X in which somebody had written, I want Trump to change ICE to NICE. So the media has to say nice agents all day, every day. And, of course, that would definitely upset him. President Trump wrote on his True Social post, that's a great idea. Let's do it. Fox News has reached out to the White House for comment. Official White House Rapid Response X account shared a screenshot of Trump's True Social post. If they had to say nice things about ICE, it would be quite a backlash, I think. Well, King Charles and Queen Camilla going to visit Trump at the White House. The first U.S. trip as the British monarchs have a packed schedule for their first visit to the U.S. since becoming Britain's monarchs. The visit to the U.S. marks the first time a British monarch has visited the country since the late Queen Elizabeth visited in 2007 to celebrate the anniversary of the Jamestown settlement. The visit will be an opportunity to recognize the shared history of our two nations, the breadth of the economic, security, and cultural relationships developed since then, and the deep people-to-people connections that unite the communities, according to a press release from the UK Embassy. During their 4-day visit and celebrations of the 250th anniversary of America's independence, the King and Queen have traveled to D.C., New York, and Virginia, where they meet with the country's leaders and different community organizations. Royal visit comes after Washington, D.C. was shaken by a shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday. President Trump, Vice President Vance, and First Lady Melania Trump and other top officials were evacuated from the Washington Hilton Hotel ballroom after gunmen exchanged fire with Secret Service agents in the lobby before being subdued and taken into custody. And as I said earlier, the suspect, identified as 31-year-old Cole Allen of Torrance, California, actually shot a Secret Service officer in his ballistic vest before being tackled to the ground. He's going to make a full recovery. Well, Representative Ro Khanna says DHS must be funded after was pressed on the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting fallout. He's a Democrat of California representative. Said Sunday Congress should maintain full funding for the Department of Homeland Security, while reiterating his opposition to specific immigration and customs enforcement spending. Those remarks came during an interview on NBC's Meet the Press after the overnight shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington. When asked by host Kristen Welker if Congress needed to act in response to the violence at the Washington Hilton, he emphasized his support for DHS, but drew a firm line regarding ICE. He said, absolutely, we've been funding DHS. The Democrats have been saying we want to fund DHS. We just don't want to fund ICE for raids against American citizens and immigration in ways that break the law. Well, part of the problem that they seem to overlook is if you don't do something about immigration, the problems just get worse. And unfortunately, the Democrats are doing everything they can to keep the border door open. Jennifer Lopez sends fans into a frenzy. She shows off chiseled abs and gym selfies. The actress and singer showcased her chiseled abs in a tiny crop top and low-rise leggings. The mother of two, who captioned a trio of images on Instagram carousel, the simple emoji of a flexed arm muscle, took the mirror photos during a break in her workout. She wowed in the long-sleeve, low-cut crop top paired with black leggings that put her toned midsection on full display. One fan wrote, "You look stunning, my inspiration forever." Another said, You're perfect, goddess." Well, if they would just content themselves with posing and instead of trying to run the country, it'd be a whole lot better, in my personal opinion. Keisha went skinny dipping for Mother Nature. Kristen Cavallari models for her brand and cones of shame. It's Sunday, and a lot of individuals were posting in various forums on Sunday. But all the problems we're facing, we got people whose main claim to fame is the fact that they look good on camera. Well, the Correspondents' Dinner host, Oz Perlman, recalled the surreal moments during the shooting. And they say they're going to do it again. Hopefully they'll have better security. I understand the security at the Correspondents' Dinner was not at a presidential level, and this individual took advantage of it. Well, former Disney star Maitland Ward says young actors were treated like a product in Hollywood factory. As a teenager, Maitland Ward, who first found fame as Jessica Forrester in The Bold and the Beautiful, later Rachel McGuire in the beloved 90s Disney TV show Boy Meets World, was exposed to a dark side of Hollywood that wasn't often discussed. Being put in compromising, provocative positions as a minor on set to quickly becoming a product of a twisted male gaze at such a young age. California native faced a wave of challenges, now gearing up to expose the pitfalls of young stardom. Well, it's like nobody hid it from her. She knew what she was getting into, and now suddenly she wants to, oh, poor me. Well, let's see. Every stop on King Charles and Queen Camilla's U.S. visit has a meaning. When King Charles III and Queen Camilla are set to travel to parts of the U.S. beginning Monday, today, with new details outlining a multi-city visit to celebrate America's 250th anniversary of independence. The royal couple will visit Washington, D.C., New York City, Virginia from April 27th to April 30th, marking King Charles' first official state visit to the U.S. as monarch. Queen Elizabeth II previously carried out 4 state visits to the U.S. in 1957, 76, 91, and 2007. And President Trump's going to host the royal couple at the White House. He says he's looking forward to the visit. Speaking to Fox News anchor Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday, he said the royal trip to the U.S. was moving forward as planned. He said King Charles is coming, and he's a great guy, and we look forward to it. He's really a fantastic person and a tremendous representative of his country. Well, there's been talk of him having a sit-down with Prince Harry, but I don't think that's going to happen. Archaeologists have pinpointed the site of a doomed Spanish Roanoke colony after unearthed a single clue. They pinpointed the exact location of the so-called Spanish Roanoke, a doomed colony that collapsed within the years after they uncovered a single coin and helped confirm the site. A group of Chilean researchers recently announced the discovery of the exact location of Rey Don Felipe, later known as Port Famine, along the Strait of Magellan in Chilean Patagonia. The colony was established by King Philip II of Spain in 1584 in an effort to control the strait, the critical passage between the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean. Within 3 years, the site was found abandoned and its colonists dead, earning the name Port Famine. Using metal detectors and high-precision geolocation, researchers track variations in signal strength across the ground to pinpoint where to dig. And they unearthed the coin, a significant find because it was recovered in situ, meaning exactly where it was originally placed. Find was consistent with historical accounts describing a coin placed as part of a founding ritual. We initially detected a very strong signal, but we don't know what it was, according to Francisco Garrido, an archaeologist at Chile's National Museum of Natural History. With the data we gathered, we selected the excavation point, and that's where we found the coin. It's a Real de la Cojo, or a piece of 8, commonly used across the Spanish Empire. Well, let's see. Well, every stop on King Charles and Queen Camilla's U.S. visit has been outlined in case you want to go see them. They're set to travel to parts of the U.S. beginning Monday with new tales outlining a multi-city visit. As I said earlier, they're going to go to Washington, D.C., New York City, and Virginia. The President Trump, who is the host, and will actually host the royal couple to the White House, said he's looking forward to the visit. Well, we'll see if it goes peacefully and calmly. Well, the California growers are warning of a master plan at strangling family farms. They're muttering about $1,600 heads of lettuce. Diesel was once 5 cents a gallon. According to one Malibu area farmer, his fuel cost him more than tripled in 3 years. In the rugged salt-sprayed hills of Malibu and the sun-drenched valleys of Moore Park, the Golden State is losing its luster. For nearly 80 years, Larry Thorne's family has watched the Pacific fog roll over fields that feed the community. But today, that view is clouded by a different kind of threat. Triple threat of $7 a gallon diesel. Soaring electricity rates and the regulatory environment so suffocating, local farmers are calling in a master plan to run the working class out of the state. And that was even going on when I lived there. It's only gotten worse. Well, going back to Representative Ro Khanna says DHS has to be funded. According to Khanna, we've been funding DHS, and we want to fund DHS, he said. We just don't want to fund ICE because they're conducting raids against folks who would one day vote Democrat because we were so magnanimous in letting them into the country. He appeared on a program the morning after the gunman breached a security checkpoint at a hotel where the annual black tie event was being held. That's the correspondence standard, don't you know? Authorities confirmed the suspect, identified as 31-year-old Cole Tomas Allen of Torrance, California, was carrying a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives when he was intercepted by Secret Service agents. Khanna condemned the attack and praised law enforcement who intervened. He said, "I'm so relieved the president, the first lady, and every administration official and all the guests are safe. I appreciate law enforcement, particularly the Secret Service agent who was shot, and hope he makes a full recovery." Beyond the immediate investigation, he called for a unified bipartisan effort to address the rise in domestic political violence. Well, part of the problem and part of the instigation for this violence is the rhetoric coming out of the Democratic Party. Well, a lot of the news today is about King Charles and Queen Camilla coming to this country. And on that note, we're going to turn to our story for today. You know, we've talked about a lot of strange and unusual things. And today we're going to talk about the Devil's Triangle. It certainly there's a lot to talk about. Now, for those who are not familiar with the Devil's Triangle, it's also called the Bermuda Triangle. And there's been a lot of high-profile disappearances. In fact, the Navy's greatest non-combat loss took place in the Bermuda Triangle. The USS Cyclops. You know, before planes began vanishing into thin air, ships were already vanishing beneath the waves. One of the most baffling of these cases revolves around the USS Cyclops, a massive U.S. Navy cargo ship. It vanished without even sending a single distress signal. Happened in 1918, during the final stretch of World War I. The Cyclops, nearly the length of a football field, it was a massive ship, had been transporting 11,000 tons of magnesium ore, critical for steel production, and it had over 300 crew members and passengers. It left the port of Barbados en route to Baltimore, and then it sailed into nothing. Somewhere between the Caribbean and the U.S. mainland, USS Cyclops just disappeared, completely without a trace. No SOS, no debris, no oil slick, no floating bodies, just silence. And as I said earlier, it remains the single largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. Navy history. The ship was never found, nor any of the 306 people that were on board. And for over a century, the ocean has held on to its secrets. Now, naturally, the disappearance of such a massive vessel has inspired countless theories. Some grounded, some not so grounded. Mechanical failure and structural weakness have been suggested. The ship was known to have engine issues, and it was overloaded at the time of the final voyage. But if it sank due to a technical problem, why didn't it sound a distress signal? Even in 1918, ships had basic communication equipment. Some theorists believe the ship may have been targeted by enemy submarines. It was wartime. But no German U-boat ever took credit for the attack. No records to support the fact that an attack may have taken place. Now, there are also some very strange ideas about what may have happened to it. Stories have circulated the Cyclops was overtaken by a rogue wave, a sudden geomagnetic disturbance even pulled into a dimensional rift. Portal in the heart of the Bermuda Triangle that swallows ships whole. One theory even suggested a mutiny or a secret mission gone wrong, though there's no evidence to back up anything like this. And of course, there's the ghost ship tales. Over the decades, sailors have claimed to see a massive vessel resembling the Cyclops drifting silently in the fog. Its decks lifeless, its hull rusting with time. Some folks say it appears and disappears with no explanation. Just a phantom of the past still sailing the triangle. Whatever the truth might be, the USS Cyclops has become one of the most enduring and chilling mysteries of the sea. A ship that big, carrying that many people, simply does not normally vanish. But it did. Well, from the Cyclops, let's turn to another large ship, the Carroll A. Deering. It's January 31st, 1921. Five-masted schooner. Carroll A. Deering ran aground on the treacherous Diamond Shoals off the coast of North Carolina. Stretch of water nicknamed the Graveyard of the Atlantic. That ship, even after grounding, stood tall and intact, her sails flapping in the wind. But something was very, very wrong. When rescuers finally boarded the ship, they found nobody on board. Ship's logbook, navigation tools, lifeboats, and even personal belongings were gone. The guy that looked over the meal had been prepared and left untouched. Just frozen in time, I guess you could say. Shoes still sat neatly near bunks, but the entire crew had vanished without a single sign of a struggle. This wasn't a shipwreck. It was a ghost ship. The Deering had just completed a cargo run to Brazil and was on a return trip to Norfolk, Virginia. There had been nothing unusual in prior communications. Yet sometime between her last known sighting and her final resting place on the shoals, the crew all mysteriously vanished, leaving behind one of the most famous maritime mysteries in American history. Of course, there had been a lot of speculation about what might have happened. One popular theory said it was pirates. At that time, piracy and smuggling were still concerns, especially in the Caribbean and Atlantic waters. And the Deering's route took it dangerously close to these areas. Could the crew have been kidnapped or killed during a pirate raid? Maybe the ship was hijacked and abandoned. But there are no signs of a violent encounter. No blood, no bullet holes, nothing looted or ransacked. The ship was almost too perfect in its stillness, eerily preserved, like somebody had intentionally walked away from it. Some again suspect a mutiny took place, pointing fingers at the crew's reported frustration with the ship captain. Could the men have staged a rebellion and fled using the lifeboats, only to be lost at sea? Well, if that was true, why did no wreckage of the lifeboats or bodies ever wash ashore? And then, of course, with all the great mysteries, when logic fails to explain the impossible, the supernatural steps in. Stories soon emerged suggesting the Carroll Deering had crossed into something unnatural. A rift, a dimension, a cursed current. Some locals whispered about strange lights spotted in the sky near the ship's route. Others pointed to the proximity of the Bermuda Triangle, suggesting the schooner may have been temporarily pulled into that realm of lost time and returned empty. One sailor claimed to have seen the Deering adrift days before it grounded, moving swiftly but without a soul on sight. Others suggested the crew had been lured away by some unseen force, maybe drawn overboard by voices or visions or even madness. Decades later, the Carroll A. Deering remains one of the most chilling ghost ships tales ever recorded. Not because of gore or wreckage, but because of the silence. All the unanswered questions. The sense that whatever happened on board didn't belong in our world. Well, from commercial ships, let's turn to private yachts. First one we're going to talk about was appropriately named The Mystery. Day after Christmas, December 26, 1967. Luxury yacht, I can't talk, named the Witchcraft set sail from Miami's marina. There were 2 people on board. Dan Burek, successful businessman, and his close friend and a Catholic priest, Father Patrick Horgan. They were going on a long journey, just a short, peaceful evening cruise to admire the Christmas lights of the Miami coastline. At 9 p.m., from about a mile offshore, Burek radioed the Coast Guard. Reported something had struck the hull, but he assured him they weren't in immediate danger. He just wanted assistance being towed back to port. Within 19 minutes, the Coast Guard arrived at the location and found nothing. No sign of the Witchcraft, no debris, no Burke, no Father Horgan, no life vests, no flares, not even a ripple in the water. It was as if the boat and everybody on it had just vanished into thin air. Well, the Coast Guard was baffled. The weather was calm, visibility was excellent. Burke was an experienced yachtsman, and the Witchcraft was equipped with flotation gear that made it virtually unsinkable. Even if the yacht had suffered catastrophic damage, it would have remained afloat long enough for help to arrive, or for debris to be found later on. None ever was. For weeks, the Coast Guard searched over 24,000 square miles of ocean. They used aircraft, patrol boats, and sonar. Not a single trace of the Witchcraft or her passengers ever surfaced. And this, of course, led to a lot of theories, some dark, some downright paranormal. Of course, the initial question was the boat sabotaged? Was it hijacked? Was there a third person on board, somebody unknown? No evidence pointed to foul play, but the abruptness of the disappearance did raise eyebrows. Then, of course, there were the whispers. Some believed the Witchcraft was pulled into another dimension, the so-called time slip or electromagnetic vortex common in triangle lore. Others claim Barrick may have stumbled upon something the ocean didn't want found. Underwater anomaly, a sacred installation, or even worse. And then, of course, there's stories that revolved around the name of the ship, the Witchcraft. Now, it's probably just coincidence. But to conspiracy theorists and paranormal buffs, the name feels like a twisted prophecy. You know, the eerie mark in a region that refuses to play by nature's rules. Whatever the truth might be, the disappearance of the Witchcraft remains one of the most haunting modern cases tied to the Bermuda Triangle. There was no panic, no distress, no storm, just a quiet radio call, and when help arrived, just silence. Well, not only are ships disappearing, there have been a number of high-profile plane vanishings. The first we're going to talk about came from January 30th, 1948. A British South American Airways aircraft named Star Tiger en route from the Azores to Bermuda. It was a transatlantic flight. 25 people were on board, including crew and passengers. Everything was routine. The weather was a bit rough but manageable. The pilot maintained radio contact with air traffic control, reporting a smooth or slightly delayed flight. And then somewhere over the Atlantic, within striking distance of Bermuda, the Star Tiger simply vanished. No distress call, no mayday, no debris ever found. It just disappeared. Final radio message came about 3:15 in the morning. Crew indicated they were about 340 miles from Bermuda and expected to arrive in a few hours. but they never showed up. Despite an extensive and desperate search by air and sea, nothing was ever recovered. Not a wing, not a seat cushion, not a single trace of the aircraft or its occupants. It was if, according to researchers, it was if the plane had vanished into a hole in the sky. And then just a year later, January 17th, 1949, another British South American Airways plane, the Star Ariel, took off from Bermuda headed for Jamaica. This aircraft is part of the same fleet as the Star Tiger, and chillingly, it followed almost the exact same fate. Star Ariel radioed in to report clear skies and a smooth flight. It was reported the weather was perfect, no turbulence, no reported issues. Pilot checked in with air traffic control, reported his altitude and location, and then vanished. No distress signal, no radar anomalies, no emergency beacon, just another aircraft swallowed whole by the skies above the Bermuda Triangle. Despite another massive search effort, including planes and ships and divers, not a single piece of wreckage has ever been located. Both the Star Tiger and the Star Ariel are often cited as eerie, similar cases, two modern aircraft lost under clear skies, without a trace, without warning, and both within the same mysterious corridor of ocean. And what makes these cases, and so many others like them, so unsettling is the complete absence of clues. In our modern understanding of aviation, planes don't just disappear. Even in the 1940s, there were established protocols, radio check-ins, and emergency procedures. But in the Bermuda Triangle, don't you know, normal rules seem to blur. Time and again, radar operators reported planes that simply blink off the screen. They don't fade, they don't divert, they just simply vanish. In many triangle cases, pilots have radioed strange observations, cloud walls that appear suddenly, navigational instruments spinning wildly, visibility dropping in seconds. Some even describe sensations of weightlessness or extreme disorientation. It's these kind of phenomena, backed by both anecdotal and official reports, that have fueled theories of electromagnetic anomalies and energy vortexes and dimensional shifts within the triangle. Whether it's mechanical failure, human error, or something more mysterious, the Bermuda Triangle is a long and growing list of planes that took off confidently and never landed. But most of us have grown up hearing that the compass always points north. And that's generally true. What many don't realize is that it points to magnetic north, not true north. There are actually two norths, don't you know? Not always in the same place. Now, true north is a geographic North Pole, the fixed point that maps are based on. Magnetic north, on the other hand, is constantly drifting due to shifts in the Earth's molten iron core. In most places around the globe, the difference between the two, called magnetic declination, can be several degrees off. Pilots and navigators routinely compensate for this. But this is where the Bermuda Triangle gets weird, don't you know? There are very few places on Earth where the true north and magnetic north align perfectly. These areas are called gonic lines. Some researchers believe that the Bermuda Triangle sits on or very near one of these rare zones, at least periodically due to shifting magnetic fields. Excuse me. If that's the case, that would cause major navigational confusion, especially for older aircraft and ships that rely on magnetic compasses. If a navigator unknowingly followed a magnetic heading, assuming a normal declination, they'd be led miles off course without realizing it. The vast emptiness of the Atlantic, a small error like that can mean the difference between safe passage and vanishing. Now, pilots and sailors have long reported strange behaviors in their instruments while passing through the Bermuda Triangle. Compasses that spin erratically, altimeters that fluctuate wildly, GPS systems that suddenly lose signals or reroute without warning. Some of the most chilling accounts come from pilots that describe electronic fog, a strange gray mist that surrounds the aircraft and causes instruments to fail or behave strangely. One pilot, by the name of Bruce Jernan, famously claimed that after flying through a donut-shaped cloud in a triangle, his onboard system went haywire and he traveled 100 miles in a matter of minutes, as if time or space had somehow bent. Well, of course, scientists have proposed various explanations. solar storms affecting the magnetosphere, underwater methane gas release disrupting electronics, localized electromagnetic fields caused by unusual seafloor activity. Still, there's no single theory that's been able to explain why these anomalies seem to cluster in this one region more than others. Modern technology has helped reduce the number of incidents, but the stories persist. They even come from experienced aviators and navigators. And it does raise an unnerving question. What if Bermuda Triangle's home to a natural phenomenon we still don't fully understand? What is magnetic interference, a dimensional glitch, or something stranger still? One thing's for sure. When your instruments fail you in the Bermuda Triangle, you're on your own, sport. Well, as I said, in talking about the Cyclops, there's been theories of freak weather phenomena. Rogue waves, for example, once considered sailors' tales, mythical monsters of the sea whispered about in the low voices among old mariners. But today, rogue waves are very real and very deadly. Now, these aren't your average swells. Rogue waves are towering walls of water, sometimes reaching heights of 50 to 100 feet. They appear without warning and in calm seas. They can slam into ships with the force of a wrecking ball, flipping or snapping vessels in half before they even know what hit them. And in the Bermuda Triangle, it's prime territory. This region is where several powerful ocean currents converge, including the well-known Gulf Stream. These currents can interact in chaotic ways, forming the perfect storm of energy to give birth to a rogue wave. Added unpredictable underwater topography like trenches and seamounts, and you got nature's version of a trap door. For ships like the USS Cyclops or the Carroll A. Deering, a sudden rogue wave could explain how these massive vessels vanished with no time for distress calls, no debris, and no trace. Just one violent, unexpected hit from below, and poof, the ship's gone. In Bermuda Triangle, clear skies can turn deadly in the blink of an eye. Pilots and sailors alike have described the shock of sudden intense storms. Squalls that form almost out of nowhere, delivering torrential rain and lightning and high winds that can tear through the skies and the seas. One of the most feared phenomena of all is the so-called microburst. Violent downdraft of air that plummets from the atmosphere like a hammer, slams into planes mid-flight. Microbursts can cause a sudden loss of altitude or a total loss of control, especially for aircraft flying at lower altitudes. In some triangle disappearances, this could explain why planes simply drop from the sky with no chance to radio for help. Well, the region's unique location contributes to the chaos. Warm ocean temperatures feed fast-developing cloud systems, creating a weather cocktail that changes by the minute. Even modern radar systems can have trouble keeping up. If an unsuspecting ship or aircraft, Bermuda Triangle doesn't need paranormal forces to be dangerous. Weather alone can be fatal, and it rarely gives a second chance. Well, it turns out even NASA has taken an interest in the Bermuda Triangle, not because of aliens or because of its high-altitude weather patterns. Also because of strange atmospheric energy zones. One area near the triangle, known as the South Atlantic Anomaly, though not exactly within its borders, is where Earth's magnetic field is weakest, and satellites passing overhead often experience malfunctions and blackouts and even physical damage. While this anomaly doesn't directly overlap the Bermuda Triangle, it has raised questions about how Earth's atmosphere and magnetic interact in thin spots. NASA has also partnered with weather satellites and research projects to study rapid storm formation in the Atlantic Basin. Their findings confirm what sailors have been saying for centuries. This area of the ocean is like no place else on the Earth. Storms develop faster, move stranger, and sometimes behave in ways we still can't predict. Could the Bermuda Triangle be sitting over some unique atmospheric fault line? When it scrambles instruments and spawns deadly weather or even causes shifts in time and perception? Well, NASA, of course, hasn't confirmed any supernatural theories, but they haven't ruled them out either. They haven't ruled out the possibility there's more to learn. In the world of science, that's as close as it gets to saying we're still curious. And, of course, another factor to look at is the human factor. Before we turn our attention to aliens, time warps, and dimensional portals, it's important to acknowledge the most basic and often overlooked explanation behind many Bermuda Triangle mysteries: human error. Even the most experienced pilots and captains can make mistakes, especially under pressure, fatigue, or confusing environmental conditions. In a triangle where compass readings may seem off, weather shifts rapidly, visibility can drop in seconds, even a small navigational error can become fatal. We're going to talk about Flight 19. That was a flight of TBM Avenger during World War II. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the squadron leader, may have mistaken the Florida Keys for the Bahamas. If that's the case, his decisions intended to get him back to base would have led him further out to sea. This was a training mission, and these were all experienced pilots, many with combat training. It's a chilling idea that the entire squadron may have vanished simply because of a wrong turn and misread compass. In this era, before GPS, autopilot systems, and real-time tracking, navigation depending on charts and instruments and instinct. In the Bermuda Triangle, those tools sometimes failed, or the person reading them did. When you're in the middle of an ocean with nothing but water in every direction, a misjudged heading or missed landmark can mean the difference between safety and a headline. Now, the ocean, of course, is beautiful, no question about that, but it's also vast, isolating, and deeply psychological. It's a well-documented phenomenon called maritime vertigo, where sailors or pilots lose their sense of direction due to repetitive and disorienting visuals, endless water, cloud cover, or fog. It's like being in a sensory deprivation chamber with no up, no down, no left, no right. Combine that with failing instruments and mounting stress, and panic sets in real fast. And once fear takes over, decision-making can spiral. A seasoned pilot might overcorrect. A captain might steer into a storm trying to avoid imagined danger. A crew might abandon ship prematurely, believing it's sinking when it's actually quite stable. And fear isn't always irrational. It can also be contagious. Imagine being on a vessel when the compass starts spinning. The radio crackles to silence and a thick fog rolls in. Even the most logical minds can unravel when faced with the unknown, especially when stories of disappearances and ghosts hang heavy in the air. Psychologists believe some triangle incidents may involve group hysteria or delusional episodes triggered by stress or isolation or fatigue. Others suggest claustrophobia, seasickness, or even carbon monoxide poisoning from engine fumes could cause hallucinations or confusion. That, of course, would lead to bizarre decisions. Unfortunately, the human mind is both incredible and fragile. When it's pushed to its limits, surrounded by miles of ocean, cut off from the world, it can be just as mysterious as the Bermuda Triangle itself. Let's talk about the Puerto Rico Trench. Beneath the deceptively calm waters of the Bermuda Triangle lies one of the deepest, most mysterious features on the entire Atlantic Ocean. The Puerto Rico Trench, stretching over 800 kilometers, that's nearly 500 miles, and reaching depths of more than 27,000 feet. This trench is the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean, deeper, in fact, in some parts of the Pacific's famed Mariana Trench. And it sits right on the edge of the Bermuda Triangle. This massive trench is a result of tectonic plate activity, where the North American and Caribbean plates collide, creating not only enormous pressure and instability below the ocean floor, but also sudden shifts in underwater topography. It's a zone of earthquakes and underwater landslides, potential tsunamis, all hidden from view, of course. So the question becomes, could this particular trench be swallowing ships and planes without a trace? Some scientists do believe this is possible. In an area this deep, wreckage can easily be pulled under, broken apart, or buried beneath layers of silt and sand. Search and rescue teams wouldn't stand a chance, especially if they didn't know exactly where to look. Not hard to imagine how a vessel could vanish forever into this watery abyss. The ocean floor of the Bermuda Triangle isn't just deep. Oh no, it's alive. This region is dotted with underwater volcanoes, many of which are inactive but not extinct. These volcanic structures, known as seamounts, can rise thousands of feet from the sea floor, creating jagged towers and canyons in the darkness. Some of these volcanoes have been linked to methane gas eruptions, which we'll talk about later on. that could rapidly reduce the buoyancy of water, causing ships to sink almost vertically without warning or resistance. But the danger isn't just in sinking, it's also in the terrain. Submerged volcanoes can distort sonar signals, confuse depth measurements, and create natural traps or pull vessels into underwater ravines. Imagine sailing over what appears to be flat water, unaware that below lies a craggy volcanic slope just waiting to collapse or erupt. For aircraft, this volatile terrain could create strange updrafts, temperature shifts, electromagnetic interference that affects instruments and stability, especially when the planes are flying at low altitude. It's easy to forget the ocean floor is just as wild and unstable as the sky above it, and in the Bermuda Triangle, it's both. If you were to dive beneath the surface of the Bermuda Triangle, you'd find more than just a sloping ocean floor. You'd find sudden, violent vertical cliffs, places where the seabed drops from a few hundred feet deep to several miles straight down in a matter of minutes. They're submarine sinkholes and drop-offs formed by geological collapses, erosion, tectonic shifts. One moment you're floating above shallow water, and the next you're above the void. These drop-offs pose a serious danger to both ships and submarines. Any wreckage that slips into one of these deep holes could be lost forever, drifting beyond the reach of human detection or recovery. In fact, some scientists speculate the missing wreckage from ships like the USS Cyclops or Flight 19 may lie somewhere in these underwater chasms, either broken apart by pressure, simply buried by time and terrain. But for now, much of the Bermuda Triangle's underwater world remains unmapped, unexplored, unfathomably deep. It might be the most haunting part. Not just that things do vanish, we still have no idea where they're gone. And of course, no discussion of the Bermuda Triangle would be complete without a discussion of aliens. For decades, there have been whispers that have echoed through late-night radio shows, conspiracy forums, and UFO documentaries. What if the Bermuda Triangle is just a place where ships and planes disappear? But what if they're taken? Some theorists believe the triangle isn't just a geographic zone, but a harvesting ground for extraterrestrials. A place where time and space and physics behave differently because something or someone has made it that way. The idea isn't just a fringe, as it might sound. Eyewitnesses across the years, pilots, military personnel, even commercial sailors have described strange lights, missing time, and moments of total electronic blackout. In these moments, it's not hard to imagine a scenario where a plane or boat is quietly intercepted, lifted, and removed from our world altogether. Could the Bermuda Triangle be a portal, a refueling station, a dimensional hotspot where extraterrestrials slip between their realm and ours? Well, these questions have fueled books and theories and more than a few sleepless nights. Strangely, sightings in the Bermuda Triangle date back long before the modern UFO craze. Even Christopher Columbus wrote in his journal about strange lights hovering above the water as he approached the area. His crew reported they saw a glowing object fall from the sky and vanish into the sea. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the stories only multiply. Pilots have described metallic discs flying in formation, suddenly vanishing without a trace. Fishermen have seen glowing orbs emerge from the ocean, hover silently, and shoot off into the sky at impossible speeds. Some even claim to witness humanoid figures or silhouettes aboard these objects, watching them from the clouds or beneath the waves. One chilling pattern that surfaces in multiple triangle disappearances. No distress call. No struggle. Just silence. This clean-cut style of vanishing aligns eerily well with modern abduction lore. Complete extraction with no trace left behind. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll talk more about the Bermuda Triangle in tomorrow's show. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.